House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer wants to haul in Bill and Hillary Clinton after they failed to appear for a scheduled deposition as part of the committee's investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Watch this.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton joined her husband in defying a bipartisan lawful congressional subpoena to show up today. I think what's most disappointing to the Oversight Committee is the fact that we have, in good faith, negotiated with the Clintons' attorneys for 5 months. We will mark up criminal contempt of Congress charges for both Clintons for defying a legal subpoena.
To be clear, Bill Clinton hasn't been accused of wrongdoing, and he denies having any knowledge of Epstein's crimes. Both the Clinton keep saying they have no information that's relevant to the investigation. But should they just testify to clear up any suspicions and get the last word in on this? You know, Bill should just say to Trump, I'm more than happy to testify. You first.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I agree with that. I think that, the Clintons have done as much as everyone else that has been subpoenaed. There have been about 9 people subpoenaed, and out of those 9 people, 8 people provided sworn affidavits, and those subpoenas were released. Now, of course, the Clintons are the Clintons, and I think that they are, because of their positions as former Secretary of State and Senator and President of the United States, the Republican Oversight Committee really wants them there. They have also provided, and what Comer is not saying is they've provided affidavits, sworn affidavits. So this is the same or very close to the same as already having testified. They've also written him a 4-page letter explaining their position. And so my question is, where is the energy for that same energy for the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, who has not released I think 99% of the Epstein files? Why don't they call her and subpoena her and have her testify about what's happening?
As someone who wants to see everything in the Epstein files and wants every single person held accountable, I think the Clintons should show up. It was a unanimous vote to subpoena them. And regardless of these affidavits or anything else, I think when people don't show up, it makes them look guiltier than they are. President Clinton has shown up in tons of pictures with no wrongdoing, but images that have been released in these files and we've known of the friendship for years. And 2 years after Epstein got his sweetheart deal, Ghislaine Maxwell was invited to Chelsea's wedding. So there are some associations there that I think you put everything out there. Let it be public, let people hear, because otherwise you give them the bait to say, well, you're not doing it, we're not doing it, this person's not doing it. No, if you want the Epstein files and you want everyone held accountable, they show up and they do it.
And I just personally don't believe that congressional oversight is something that should be optional to people. I've testified before Congress, never under subpoena. I was asked to and I showed up, and I never have seen a congressional subpoena as optional. And I would remind folks that Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon both defied congressional subpoenas and then did jail time for defying those congressional subpoenas during the January 6th investigation.
Yeah, but then they were pardoned, right?
They were, but there are consequences for defying congressional subpoenas. The step before, obviously, hauling someone to jail would be holding them in contempt or continuing to work with their attorneys. The one part that I think I totally agree with Sarah, Bill Clinton is all over these files, not as many times as the president of the United States is, but if he can shed any light on associations, it's not necessarily saying he engaged in wrongdoing, but here's some people I saw, here's what I knew he was up to. That's something he should do. And his spokesperson has come out and said, this is bigger than politics, it's about getting justice for the victims. Where I take issue is this, Hillary Clinton, her name does not appear once in the Epstein files. No. She has no known association beyond, I would guess, that Ghislaine Maxwell was at Chelsea's wedding. But like this, to bring the wife into it feels weird. That would have been like dragging Justin into the January 6th investigation. She had nothing to do with anything.
That's why it's political
that part feels
and not
very
legal, and that's
to
the
use a
problem
Trump term. It feels a little witch hunty in that regard. But I do think Bill Clinton should testify.
I've known Bill and Hillary Clinton for over 20 years. They were very good friends of my ex. And they would come down to Miami and stay at his hotel all the time. So it's very hard for me, and it's not a comfortable place for me to say that I want them to show up and I want them to testify. But here's the thing. I want us as a society to hold the people that we like to the same standard that we hold the people that we don't like.
Yes.
And that also applies also applies to the House Oversight Committee. Because while they are going vociferously against Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, trying to drag them in there, all of a sudden, Donald Trump, who was one of Jeffrey Epstein's best friends for well over a decade, he gets scot-free. They are trying to haul Hillary Clinton, who has not been implicated in anything. There are no allegations involving her, at the same time that they are letting Melania Trump, who also has not been implicated or accused of anything.
Yeah.
But there's pictures of Melania
Right.
Trump with Epstein. There's not a single picture of Hillary Clinton with
Right.
Epstein. So if you're going to start dragging first ladies who have nothing to do with it,
Yeah.
then why don't we start with Melania?
And don't you think by President Clinton showing up, it gives him more power to say, now it's your
Yes.
turn.
Look, yes.
When you do it, it gives people the...
So why
But
are
see,
they saying no,
Their
do you think?
position is that that the subpoena itself is illegal and is not valid because it doesn't have a legislative purpose, a true legislative purpose. And that's why, generally, I would agree with you, and I would agree with you. You do not defy a congressional subpoena. And that's why Peter Navarro spent 4 months in prison. But in this case, it feels very political rather than legal. Why aren't they subpoenaing the President of the United States, Donald Trump, although he has denied any wrongdoing? Why not Melania Trump? Why did they let 8 people who were also subpoenaed provide the same kind of affidavits that the Clintons did?
Yeah.
Why did they then allow that to happen without them showing up?
And I think that's very
if it were
important.
purely legal,
Yeah.
I would be.
But were the
I think
Clintons
it's
the
some of
biggest names of those affidavits?
Well-
Because I think Clinton, being a former president, that it has more power to go in there and sit down and
But it
say...
makes it more political.
Let's remember that when the
Sadly,
picture-
this
the
whole
pictures
administration's political.
came out in December, late December, Bill Clinton asked that every item that involves him, that everything about him be released, because it feels like they cherry-picked what are the most salacious pictures, right? There's pictures of Bill in a pool. Put it all
Okay,
out
and
there.
keep
so
in mind,
then why are they now subpoenaing the Clintons? Is it to distract from something yet again?
Because they have not released the files.